Silas Whitmore sat at the worn wooden table in his cramped cabin, a trembling pen clutched in his weathered hands. The weight of 45 years bore down on him like a pile of stones, each year heavier than the last. The cabin, once a sanctuary, felt suffocating, its walls closing in since the bank's foreclosure notice arrived 3 weeks ago. By sunset tomorrow, the ranch, his father's legacy, his life's work, would belong to strangers. His calloused fingers tightened around the pen. The words he needed to write had to be simple, unadorned. No drama, no blame, just the stark truth: he'd lost everything. His wife to fever 2 winters ago, his son to a war that devoured a generation. There wasn't much left of Silas Whitmore worth saving that he scratched out the first line: "To whoever finds this letter." The words came easier than he'd expected, but before he could continue, a piercing cry shattered the afternoon's stillness. A woman's voice, high and desperate, sliced through the quiet like a blade. Silas froze, listening. The cry came again, closer, frantic. He pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the floorboards. Through the dusty window, the dirt road to town lay empty, but the shouting grew louder, unmistakably a woman's voice, raw with panic. Silas stood, his knees creaking from too long at the table. He'd planned for today to be clean, final, no interruptions, no second thoughts. But the voice wouldn't stop. He moved to the window, pulling back the faded curtain. A figure stumbled up the road, a small woman with dark hair streaming behind her, clutching something in her arms. Her screams, in a language he didn't know, carried a universal terror. As she neared, Silas saw her clearly, young, maybe late 20s, her features marking her as one of the Chinese families who trickled into the territory, working mines or railroads. She reached his porch and collapsed against the railing, gasping. In her arms was a small girl, pale as ash, barely breathing. The woman looked up at Silas, her eyes wide with fear. Through broken English, her words hit like a gunshot: "Please, my daughter, she dying." Silas stared, the pen still in his hand, its ink meant for his final words. But the sight of this desperate mother and her fading child stirred something he thought was long dead. The woman's tears carved tracks through the dust on her face. Her name was Lynn, and she'd run 3 miles in the scorching heat, her only hope a stranger who looked like he'd already given up. Silas dropped the pen and stepped outside. The girl, May, couldn't have been more than 6. Her breaths were shallow, her skin gray, a look Silas knew too well from his wife's final days. "Doctor," Lynn gasped between sobs. "Need doctor." "Town. They say no. They say, go away." Silas understood. The town had a handful of Chinese families, tolerated at best, shunned at worst. Doc Mercer was decent, but his waiting room would clear out if he treated a Chinese patient. "What's wrong with her?" Silas asked, surprised by his own voice. "Fever, 3 days, Lynn said, her voice breaking. "She no wake up, no eat, no drink. I try everything. She all I have." Her daughter's name was May, she explained through tears. They lived in a shack behind Wong's grocery, Lynn scraping by with odd jobs. When May fell ill, Lynn had begged for help, only to face slammed doors and cold stares. Silas studied Lynn. She was younger than he'd first thought, not yet 30, with a delicate beauty that reminded him of his wife's cherished porcelain dolls. But there was iron in her, a refusal to break despite the world's cruelty. "I ain't no doctor," he said finally. "Please." Lynn stepped closer, holding May toward him. "You only one who not close door. You listen." Something twisted in Silas's gut. He'd planned to end his story today, but life was knocking, demanding he listen. The irony wasn't lost on him. He looked at May, her tiny fists clenched, fighting even in unconsciousness. "Doc Mercer's above the general store," Silas said slowly. "But he won't see her without money up front. Especially," he gestured at Lynn's worn dress, her foreign features. Lynn fumbled in her pocket, producing a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it, revealing a pitiful handful of coins. enough for bread, not a doctor's visit. It was everything she had, offered without hesitation for her daughter's life. Silas glanced at the unfinished letter inside. The world had taken everything from him, but standing before this mother's desperation, something shifted. "Put that away," he said quietly. "We're gonna need my horse." The 3-mile ride to town was agonizing. Lynn clung to May behind Silas on his old mare, whispering prayers in her native tongue, checking her daughter's faint breaths. Main Street buzzed with ranch hands and cattle buyers, more eyes to witness Silas's choice to help a Chinese woman when others had turned her away. He pulled up outside Morrison's general store, where Doc Mercer's office sat above, marked by a weathered sign. As Lynn dismounted, clutching May, James Morrison appeared in his doorway, wiping his hands on his apron. "Hold on, Whitmore," Morrison called. "You can't bring them up to document. Folks won't stand for it." His voice carried the weight of public opinion, always his guiding star. Silas's jaw tightened. He'd known Morrison for years, a man who measured every word against the town's mood. "Child sick, Morrison." "Real sick," Silas said. Lynn stepped forward, her voice steady despite her tears. "My daughter dying. She need help now." A voice cut through the growing crowd. "You speak English pretty good for someone who don't belong here," sneered Billy Sawyer, a Prescott Ranch hand. The crowd murmured agreement, their faces hardening. Silas felt the familiar weight of being outnumbered, but he saw something uglier in his neighbor's eyes. Prejudice laid bare. "She belongs here same as anyone," Silas said quietly. "Pays taxes, follows the law." "Does she?" Morrison's tone sharpened. "Word is, Whitmore, you're losing your ranch to the bank. Maybe you ain't in a position to make stands." The word stung, public humiliation cutting deeper than Silas expected. Lynn stiffened, understanding the insult. Doc Mercer appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. "What's this about?" he called, his kind eyes nervous. Before anyone could answer, May let out a weak cry, a sound that silenced the crowd, a child's pain, undeniable. But recognition didn't mean action. Mercer hesitated, torn between his oath and the town's expectations. "Doc, this girl needs help now," Silas said, his voice firm. Morrison stepped forward. "Doc, you know what's best for this town. We got standards." "Standards?" "Mrs. Catherine Henley, the preacher's wife, pushed through the crowd, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. In her 60s, she was a force, organizing charity and feeding the poor regardless of race. "James Morrison, since when do our standards include letting children die in the street?" Morrison shifted. "This ain't about letting anyone die. They got their own ways, herbs, and such." "Hogwash," Mrs. Henley snapped, inspecting May's fevered face. "This baby needs a doctor." The crowd split, some siding with Morrison, others wavering as maternal instincts clashed with bias. Mercer cleared his throat. "Examinations $2 up front." Lynn reached for her coins, but Silas stopped her, pulling out his last $5, his emergency fund, meant for a life he'd planned to end. "Here's your fee," he said, holding up the bills. Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Where's a man about to lose his ranch get money like that?" "None of your damn business," Silas growled, his tone making Morrison step back. But Billy Sawyer pushed forward. "Maybe you're getting paid to help these people cause trouble." Mrs. Henley stepped between them, her presence a wall. "Billy Sawyer, if helping a sick child is trouble, you need church more than the saloon." The crowd fell silent, her authority absolute. Mercer descended the stairs, looking at Lynn and May, not the crowd or the money. "Bring her up," he said simply. Morrison protested, but Mercer cut him off. "I took an oath. Anyone who's got a problem with me treating a child can find a new doctor." Inside the office, Mercer worked quickly, examining May's throat, chest, and pulse. His face grew grim. "Pneumonia, advanced. Her lungs are full of fluid. Without treatment, she might not see morning." Lynn's knees buckled, Silas steadied her, recognizing her despair from his own losses. "You can help her?" he asked. "Maybe," Mercer said. "Laudanum for pain, camphor for breathing, but she needs constant care for 24 hours. Cool cloths, medicine, a clean, warm place." Lynn had no such place, the boarding house wouldn't take her, and her shack was unfit. Silas spoke before he could stop himself. "She can stay at my place." Both Lynn and Mercer stared. "You sure?" Doc asked. "Folks'll watch your every move after this." "Let them watch," Silas said. "Child needs help. I got a clean house, warm bed." Lynn's eyes brimmed with hope. "You do this for strangers?" "You ain't strangers anymore," Silas replied. Mercer gathered supplies, medicine, bandages, instructions. "Spoonful every 4 hours," he told Lynn. "Cool cloths for the fever. If her breathing worsens, get me, day or night." The ride back was tense, the town stairs heavy as they passed. At the cabin, Silas gave May his own bed, where Lynn tended her with practiced care, revealing she'd learned healing from her midwife mother in China. "War came, everything changed," she said softly. "We came to America for May's future. Her father died on the ship. Just us now. You lose family too," she added, seeing Silas's pain. "Wife and boy," he confirmed, nodding. They sat in silence, two souls bound by grief, watching over a child fighting for life. The unfinished letter lay forgotten on the table, its purpose fading as Silas realized the world wasn't done with him yet.